Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman tabled the budget in the Parliament. The big announcements are around taxes, the fiscal deficit and budgetary allocations for key sectors.
Now, we of course know that you've got a lot of questions and we have all the experts and the analysis this for you. But before we play out the highlights from her announcement, let's in fact listen in to some of the key announcements that were made by Nirmala Sitharaman.
I am now happy to announce that there will be no income tax payable up to income of 12 lakh rupees. In the new tax regime, I propose to revise tax rate structures as follows: 0 to 4 lakh rupees nil, 4.8 lakh rupees to 4 to 8 lakh rupees 5%, 8 to 12 lakh rupees 10%, 12 to 16 lakh rupees 15%, 16 to 20 lakh rupees 20%, 20 to 24 lakh rupees 25%, and above 24 lakh rupees 30%. The revised estimate of the total expenditure is 47.16 lakh crore rupees, of which the capital expenditure is about 10.18 lakh crore rupees. The revised estimate of the fiscal deficit is 4.8% of the GDP.
And for more on this, we have some political reactions coming in after the Finance Minister tabled the budget in the Parliament. Just take a listen.
पूरे देश पर हमारे बहुत सारे जो ईमानदारी से इनकम टैक्स देते हैं उनका एक एक्सपेक्टेशन था कि रिलीफ आएगा और जबरदस्त रिलीफ आएगा। जो फ्लोर था 7 लाख का, कुछ लोग एक्सपेक्ट कर रहे थे 8 या 10 लाख तक जाएगा, 12 लाख तक जाके पूरा ये जबरदस्त हिट हुआ है पूरे देश।
The budget seems to be like that, is planned in such a way to move the voters for Delhi, especially the Delhi election coming on the 5th of this month. The Finance Minister has given a big exemption, saying that for 12 lakhs, there's no tax. Then she goes on to say that there's a slab of 8 to 12 lakhs, there's 10%. So it's very, very confusing.
ये मिडिल क्लास के लिए जो ये बजट हुआ है, ये मजबूत भविष्य बजट हुआ। आप टैक्स एग्जेम्पशन देख लीजिए, आज सीधे 12 लाख पर चला गया है टैक्स एग्जेम्पशन मध्य समाज का, और इसकी संवेदनशीलता को प्रधानमंत्री ने समझा कि उस पर समाज का बोझ कितना है उसके
Up to income of 12 lakh.
An interesting budget. It's slightly a departure from some of the previous budgets that we had, of course, seen, because one of the key aspects that have been addressed is the distress that the middle class was, of course, feeling in terms of inflation, in terms of the taxes that were being paid. There was this sentiment that was going around that the middle class does all the heavy lifting when it comes to paying the taxes, and they get very little in return. But this time round, it's interesting that we have the Finance Minister who's addressing the middle classes specifically, which was something that she in fact stated right at the outset of the budget as well.
Right, Saleh. And for more on this, we're now being joined by Lekha Chakrabarti, Professor NIPFP and Board Member of International Institute of Public Finance World Association of Public Finance Economists. She's joining us live from West Bengal. Welcome to WION, Ms. Chakrabarti.
Thank you.
First up, of course, your major takeaways from the budget, and what do you make of that major tax relief for the middle class?
Thank you. When I look at this budget, I really felt that this is a business as usual budget. Though that announcement in the end, that rabbit she pulled out of the hat, that was like the income tax relief for the middle class. But I'm quite concerned about the overall framework of this budget, because that one announcement, it's getting neutralized by the overall framework of this budget. Because if you look into the numbers, the fiscal arithmetic, the numbers look all right. But where she has done the size of the government, that cut in the expenditure is a matter of concern, because it was 48 lakh crore last year. This time she adjusted it to 47, and the fiscal deficit to GDP she pegged, that was, as anticipated, it was not 4.5%, but it is below that. So there is a huge expenditure compression that has happened. And given this folly crisis, given this, mounting uncertainties globally, we thought that it is going to be a very radical, budget, just like the way the 1991 reforms happened. It is going to be a very radical budget, but it was a business as usual, and it is a matter of concern where
Right.
the expenditure compression has happened.
It's
Yeah.
interesting that you mentioned that there is a compression in government expenditure. Now, the philosophy perhaps of the governments over the course of the last few years had been that they wanted to tax from the people and from the companies so that the government would have money and the government would then decide in terms of where that money would be spent. But this time round, the reason as to why there is perhaps a reduction in the amount of government spending is also because the government is taking so much less from the people. And the money is being put into the hands of the people so that they can then decide as to where they want to spend, which in turn, the government hopes, would increase consumption. Are you not convinced with the government's change of approach?
I'd love to disagree with you, because you believe that the disposable income in the hands of the people through the income tax relief, that will trigger the aggregate demand, and that flexibility for spending lies with the people. But I don't know, what is the link between the income tax relief and the way we can trigger the economic, growth? Because, if the propensity to save is greater than the propensity to spend, we had it. That's the fear, Rekram Rajan and other economists were raising. And income tax is not a way to increase the disposable income in the hands of the people. And now we are very worried about, the youngsters, the plummeting job, the
Right.
plummeting employment, where more money should come through the participation income. But the job of the budget is to create the jobs.
Right.
So there, I'm quite concerned that whether this link you mentioned, that giving more income in the hands of the people, the disposable income in the hands of the people by this non-income tax slab, increasing that will do that magic. I'm concerned about
I'm
that
just playing the
argument.
devil's advocate here. This is classical Keynesian economics, which would say that if you give more money into the hands of the people, they would go ahead and spend it to, fulfill the needs that they have, which in turn will create a virtuous cycle. That one believes is what the government is aiming for. Are you not convinced with that?
Sure, increasing the income in the hands of the people, if you're giving the cash transfers, that's what is the element, what was the element suggested by the previous CEA, Arvind Subramaniam. And many states are playing with that, given the fiscal policy and elections link, by providing the cash transfers into the hands of people.
Right.
That's a different kind of an approach to increase the disposable income in the hands of the people. But the income tax, how many people are paying income tax in India? Because in the organized sector, it's quite, maybe 4%. And within the 4%, how many people are paying the income tax? So it's a minuscule population proportion, where she was targeting. And that is not a broad-based approach to increase the
Right.
income in the hands of the people. But I do agree with your logic of the Keynesian. A thing like give more money and let the aggregate demand go up. But the income tax exemption or that approach, I don't think that is broad-based.
Right, just to take that point forward, how do you perhaps see the finance minister boosting urban consumption, which was one of the major concerns before the budget was tabled, like what even Saleh was talking about here, with tax relief also putting more money in the hands of the consumers?
Oh, good. That's a good point. The principle of subsidiarity. Let the government closest to the people, let them take the decision. And she has done that urban challenge fund. So that principle of subsidiarity, by giving money into the hands of the level of government closest to the people, is quite okay. Not only at the urban level, but also at the state government's level, by providing, that interest free loan, for a great period of time for the capex generation. So that approach towards giving importance to the lowest tiers of the government or the subnational government is fine. But I could feel a kind of within the cooperative federalism, a kind of a preferential treatment to a certain states, because if you're doing that, the principle of subsidiarity is happening through a preferential statement. That's very demoralizing, because let the Finance Commission do that job, the way in which they decide the intergovernmental fiscal transfers.
Right.
But if you use the budget as a tool, that can lead to a kind of an capture, a political elite capture. That's what I'm concerned.
Interesting. Now, a lot of talk will, of course, be as to have the finance minister has gone ahead and addressed the concerns of the middle class by giving them some amount of relief with respect to the taxes. But a lot of people have been complaining about how the government and the revenue machinery works in collecting taxes. There was almost a fear that we were living in a regime of tax terrorism. Do you think, by the announcements that she has made today, that she's in fact gone on to address the manner in which the taxes will be collected, both from the corporates and from the individuals here?
Absolutely. This tax terrorism, because in the Arun Jaitley's time also, he mentioned that, I'm remembering him, that tax terrorism, he's accused of tax terrorism because corporate taxes were very high at that time. But given the pillar 2 of the international taxation and the OECD negotiations in the pillar 2, we need to reduce the corporate tax to the global minimum tax of 15%. And over the years, government has done that for the corporate tax. But income tax reforms, we were waiting for that. But again, the direct taxation and indirect taxation, if we look into, it's not just confined to a few people, the corporate or the rich paying tax, and we are cross-subsidizing the middle class people or the poor with that. Given the structure of indirect taxes, quite huge in the overall tax structure, it's not cross-subsidizing because equally paying tax and the taxation is getting regressive. So I look at it from that point of view. Of course, to attract the mobile capital,
right,
we reduce the corporate taxes, and that's welcome, that the global minimum taxes for the corporate taxes. But it's not only about the indirect taxes, but there is a link between the direct taxes and indirect taxes.
Right, Ms. Chakrabarti, while the tax relief is one of the focal point right now, let's also talk about some of the transformative reforms that the finance minister made across domains like taxation, power, urban, mining and other regulatory reforms. Your assessment of that?
Oh, yes. She did that very brilliantly by providing this 0.5 extra borrowing space to the subnational governments if they undertake the power sector reforms. If you improve the financial efficiency and the operational efficiency parameters of the discom companies, then the states can avail that 0.5% of the, that fiscal deficit to GDP. She enhanced it by 0.5. So that link between the structural reforms and the fiscal consolidation, that's a welcome move, because the growth that we are facing, that's not only the cyclical growth, but the structural factors of the growth process is equally relevant, and she has focused on the structural reforms, especially in the power sector. And this is also relevant if you look into the link between the fiscal transition and the energy transition. The power sector is very relevant, and that link, I do welcome the way she has linked the fiscal consolidation process and the power sector, the reforms. And coming to the mining, of course, we have moved the ad valorem taxes, but the competitiveness of the sector is getting affected, and many corporate firms are very vocal about it, because if you increase the taxation related to the natural taxes or the royalty for the mining and the multiplicity of the taxes, given the carbon taxation and all, it will affect the competitiveness of the mining sector, and it will in turn affect the augmentation of revenue as well. So we have to wait and see the structural reforms. Yeah.
Right, Ms. Chakrabarti. Please stay with us. We also have with us our correspondent, Dharamjot Kaur. who is joining us live from outside the Parliament. Dharamjot, in the past few days and even minutes before the budget was tabled, you were cautiously optimistic, and it looks like this budget was for the middle class, for the poor. Talk to us about that and any reactions from the lawmakers that you have garnered.
Well, Resha, first things first, there's definitely a lot of relief among the middle class and the salaried of India, given that they're seeing an optimistic change to the new tax regime, that is, keeping in mind that the old tax regime remains the same. There's no change on that front. So seeing an increase in the rebate from 7 lakhs to 12 lakhs, and then the tax slabs also offering more money in the pocket of the middle class, that has definitely been welcome news. But on the political front, as was expected, the opposition has not reacted very well to the budget announcements that have been made. Two things to be kept in mind here in particular with respect to the tax slabs and the tax respite that was announced for the middle class. A lot of opposition parties and leaders are saying that this has come just a few days before the Delhi elections. So this is more of a political move, keeping in mind the polls that are coming up on February 5. They also accused the government of not making any special reference with respect to grants and schemes to southern states in India, given the fact that a lot of reference was made to the state of Bihar. Now, it's interesting to note here that the Chief Minister Nitish Kumar's party is a very critical ally of the government. And given the fact that this is the first, union budget under the third term of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and the fact that it's a government that has been formed in coalition and not a clear majority. So clearly, the party has taken care of the needs of its allies, if that can be said. Just to quickly point out, what the state of Bihar has received in this particular, budget announcement. In the agrarian sector, there has been a board that has been set up for Makhana farmers. So that's one key announcement that came across. A National Institute of Food Technology has been set for food processing in the state, that will be set up soon. With respect to education, IIT Patna will be expanded. In the aviation sector, greenfield airports will be set up in Bihar, and particularly the Patna airport will be expanded. So there was a lot of uproar in Parliament with respect to these announcements pertaining to the state of Bihar.
Right. Dharamjot, during the budget speech, the Finance Minister also spoke about, proposed the introduction of a new income tax bill next week. She said it will be rather simple and direct. What is expected in the new IT bill, which will be tabled next week?
Well, that's the next question that everybody's asking. Now that there is clarity on what the tax, relief is for the middle class, the next question that follows up in people's minds is, well, is there going to be more clarity in terms of the taxation filing system? That needs to be clarified when the bill is tabled next week. What other provisions will be expected? We did hear the Finance Minister making statements on decriminalizing, certain aspects, like if there's a delay in TDS being filed, it won't be criminalized anymore as it was in the past. So a few other provisions like that were announced, but again, not a lot of details were given with respect to provisions of taxation filing systems and other processes that need to be followed by the Indian taxpayers. Those questions hopefully will be answered next week when the new IT bill is tabled.
Indeed, Dharamjot, that of course is something that we'll wait and watch. Thank you very much indeed for joining us and getting us all those updates from there. We'll of course keep coming back to you as this